I am constantly looking for ways to get better. That drive made me believe. You mentioned some of the adversity that I've had. It's the same thing. It's the same principles. It's the same idea that you run into a challenge and you don't quit. You find a way through. If I look back on who I was when I was 25 or 28, when I went through that rock bottom, than who I was when I was 35, still going to school and having to deal with, I'm 35 with 2 kids, still going to school, like all of those voices in your head. And everyone goes through challenges, and everyone, oh my God, is this it? Am I going to lose everything? Like there's all those things you have. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself, in my opinion, with people that care and love you. You need a good community, as close as your family or wife or husband, kids, and then, as it sort of ripples out into the different people you're around in your life. So.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. I greatly appreciate it. I got a very special guest on the line today, and I'm excited to dive in. Before we get going, if you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Check out the show notes. Pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. You know the drill. Leave a review. Really helps the show grow. Today, I have Dr. Jason Wersland. He's the founder and chief wellness officer of Therabody. He is deeply involved in Therabody's R&D process, starting with the invention of the Theragun, the world's first handheld percussive therapy device, to leading a team of scientists and engineers in creating the brand's full ecosystem of wellness technologies. Having started his wellness career as a chiropractor, he has dedicated his life to giving people access to products that can enhance their health and well-being. Dr. J, thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you.
Look, I know we just we spent some time before this call navigating some technical difficulties to get you on today. But I have to say, as a marathon runner, I feel like I've known you deeply for the last, I don't know what year you launched, but I've known you ever since you launched, because I am very deeply ingrained in your products. And so even though we're just kind of meeting, you're definitely no stranger to me. And I want to call that out up front.
I appreciate that. That's honestly what drove it for a long time, just getting it into the hands of people that needed it.
Yeah. So the cool thing is, I gave your bio, and that was a standard bio, but I've listened to you on several shows. I know you've got a lot to share with our audience as it pertains to how we even got here. I'm pretty sure that if I had asked you before your career ever started, if you had thought you'd be where you are today, you would say, not in a million years. So let's just start things off really quick. Give us a little bit of background. Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Utah.
In Utah. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
just north of Salt Lake.
What was family life for you like?
Family was amazing. I was the oldest of 7. I grew up in a big household, lots of brothers. My youngest was a sister. Yeah, it was great. I mean, I think growing up in Utah and when I grew up there was perfect. It was, I mean, my family had a farm. I spent a lot of time on our farm. You learn a lot of things. I was first generation American. My dad's from Norway. So just kind of watching him learn, he didn't go to school. He didn't have a degree, but he did everything, like, I don't know if there's anything he couldn't do. So I just thought that's just what people did, is just whether it was welding or painting or fixing a car or whatever, he just always could do that. So I grew up that way, it was learning how to be sufficient. And my wife gives me a crap about this all the time, but I was a Boy Scout. I was an Eagle. I got to be an Eagle Scout, which is a pretty big deal in my community. If you're a Scout, you know what that means. I think just, I can't complain. I had a great upbringing. My parents are amazing. They're still married, still healthy. My dad turns 80 this year, which is kind of special. So
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
it was a good time.
In a family that big, were you essentially an extension of your parents?
Yeah, I was. I mean, I don't remember, and I don't complain about this, but my dad and mom had, we were all played soccer, and so on Saturdays you could only go to one game at a time. Sometimes they could see two if they went back and forth, but I remember growing up and a lot of times my dad was my coach a couple of years. So yeah, I think probably I remember babysitting from a very early age, changing diapers and doing all the things, for my younger siblings.
You talk about your dad being a jack of all trades, essentially, and kind of being able to take care of a lot of things at once. Talk to me a little bit about, beyond the execution, and being able to navigate the multiple demands I can imagine of leading a family, especially as an immigrant. Talk to me a little bit about some of the values that he and your mother instilled in you at a young age.
Hard work, integrity, honesty, character. Um, my family was Mormon when I grew up. My parents still are. So there's a lot of those principles and guidelines that I was raised with. They they my parents, they sang together, they performed together, they were in plays together. To me, it was just sort of normal to have a family like that. We'd have dinner most every night. My mom used to pick one child a week or for each weekday, and you would make dinner with her. So you'd pick your favorite meal and she'd teach you how to make the meal. And mine was always stir fry. So I left stir fry and the sauce put on it. So yeah, I mean, my mom did summer schools, when we were younger, just to keep us from tearing the house apart. She made us play outside. My dad was a hunter. I never really liked it. I liked going, but I never really did the pull the trigger part. So yeah, it was just, I mean, I have a lot of fond memories from growing when I grew up.
You know, i- in hearing you speak, it's always awesome for me to hear the different perspectives on this show and the people coming from different places and the different backgrounds and influences. And a key tenor to this show is understanding how, at a young age, perhaps you were, um, how you built up a muscle of grit, resilience, how you were shaped to handle any sort of adversity or that potentially came your way. Clearly, as an Eagle Scout, um, you had the wherewithal um, to navigate difficult tasks that were assigned to you. But what about situations where things came your way that were perhaps unexpected? How are you, or what life experience maybe shaped you from a young age to handle adversity as an adult?
Wow, it's a great question. I mean, who doesn't have adversity in their life, really? When you look at it, I think in my younger years, like in my teen years, um, just my dad didn't make a lot of money, so I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that a lot of the other kids did. We grew up in Utah, so obviously skiing was a big thing. And my dad took us skiing. I learned how to ski when I was 5, I think. So I just having learning those things. I think everyone has adversity. Um, my dad was pretty rough. Having 5 boys, you can imagine we have the rules. You have to kind of, rule with an iron fist to some degree. But he's an amazing person. He's the best grandpa I've ever seen. So I think, like getting up early on Saturdays and lifting big stones and tilling the garden. And, we had this massive tiller that we used to have to lift in the back of this truck. And my brothers and I, we just learned a lot of hard work. I don't think I had anything more adverse than anyone else really does. I didn't have, my brother got diabetes when he was 13 or 14. And, we're about 17 months apart from each other. So I remember that was really, really traumatic because we didn't know what that meant. We thought he was going to die and all those sorts of things at that young age. But he was super healthy the most of his life. So yeah, I mean, when you talk about adversity, I think I acquired this thought or this saying: if it's not this, it's something better. And so I always felt like whatever adversity I was in, I was going to graduate into something better than that. And this was just sort of like that last little bit of resistance that you have to break through to get to that sort of next level. And I learned that, when I was 19 or 20, just sort of understanding that life gets better. It just does. I mean, I think if people really look at their life, it's always evolved into something better, unless you make dumb decisions and things like that. But that I truly believe that. And that carried with me even into Therabody, like the challenges that I had bringing Theragun into the world and into spaces that it wasn't before.
I had heard you speak before on another show about, you know, being delusional a little bit and how you need to
Yeah,
be delusional. And I mean, I love that so much because I believe that, you know, to my core. Yeah, I didn't share much of my personal story with you, and for the sake of time, I won't go deep into it. But a lot of the successes that I had seen personally were because of my delusion and because of the fact that, you know, even if on the outside no one had any reason to believe certain things would happen, I realized the only way they would happen is if what did I have to lose by just believing in myself? And I think that's a really good segue because you were a chiropractor by trade, right? Talk to me a little bit about how you got there. Was that your always intended route earlier on out of school?
great question. My neighbor growing up next to our house was the chiropractor for the Utah Jazz, Dr. Craig Bueller. He's still around, great guy, leader in that space. I didn't recognize that when I was younger. My dad's two best friends were a couple brothers named, interestingly enough, their last name was Gunn, Gunn. I think it's interesting that I came up with a Theragun, but just, when I sprained my ankle or we got sick, or I remember I had a hiatal hernia, like I just had indigestion when I was 17 or 18. And my parents would always take me to Spencer or Hal, the two brothers. And so I'd always looked up to that. To be honest, I didn't think I had the money. I didn't know I wasn't super good at understanding at a young age. When I say young age, I mean college years, how you apply for school. And I was the oldest and the first. So, um, I decided to go into the same business my dad was in at a young age. And I was in the flooring business. So I laid carpet and hardwood and tile and all that as I grew up, even 15, 16, 17, and I worked in a flooring store. So that just sort of became kind of what I did. And into my 20s, I was a sales rep for a flooring company. I was in Montana, Wyoming, and then I moved to Seattle. And I came back, got married, and I was going through a divorce. I had a flooring store that I'd opened, and my business partner embezzled all my money. So in 2000, I was bankrupt, divorced, living in my parents' house, and I had a chance to start over. And with that, I looked at that as a chance to start over. And I thought, I don't want my kids, which I had two at the time, I don't want my kids to look at me and have to see me struggle like this, So I thought, I'm going to bite the bullet. I'll go to chiro school. I'll figure it out. So at 28, I went to chiro school. I went to LA, and I chose LA because it was one flight. There was no layover to get back to Utah to see my kids. And it was, wasn't easy. I went to a 3.5-year accelerated program, and first day of class, they walked in and pulled me out of class and told me they'd miscalculated my hours. So now I had to add 2 more years of undergrad, which was not expected. And so suddenly 3.5 was 5.5. That wasn't part of the deal, So suddenly I had to reassess, like, wait a second, am I willing to do this 2 more years of sacrifice? About 5 years into school, I started taking my board exams. I didn't pass the first part of national boards 3 different times. And when you don't pass, you have to wait 6 months and pay another fee. And so that suddenly now I was 7 years into this. At my 6th year of school, I started a practice, because you can do that once you get through a certain period, through a certain stage of school, you can actually start practicing with another chiro in the office. So I opened a practice in 2006. So 2006, 2007, October 17th of 2007 was when a motorcycle accident happened. So I had 18, 19 months of a pretty decent practice, cruising along and working with athletes. There was a Long Beach football team that I did some work with and stuff, but then the accident happened. So
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's that, what's funny is not the right word here, but when I had asked you about adversity earlier, and I knew some of the things that you had just brought up, but I didn't realize the length of time there. And I also didn't realize by 28. And that puts a lot of things into perspective here, because this a lot of people could go in the complete opposite direction after all those things happen at that age.
yeah, my
And
kids saved
so
my life at the time. I mean, I don't know. I know I probably would have made different decisions if I didn't have these two little souls looking at me and realizing the responsibility you have as a father to make sure that they, if I left this earth, I wanted them to feel strong. So I needed to show that. All right. Yeah, I had a really good friend, counselor, therapist, mentor. His name was Brent Hale. I met him when I was about 17 or 18. Um, he knew he was my neighbor, so I think he was able to witness and feel kind of the challenges and intensities that was around me at the time. And so he just reached out and offered to, hey, why don't you come over and have a conversation with me? I didn't really know what that meant at the time. Fast forward, when I was 28, going through all those things, I went and saw Brent again. And Brent set me straight on gave me what I call my truth card. And it's something that I keep with me today. It's sitting right here next to me. So it's that truth card helped me stay focused on the truth about who I was, and also was the combat to the voices in my head, because we all have those,
yeah.
and they show up and they're super mean. And I think the delusion part is both internal and external. It's delusional enough to think that these voices aren't right. Like, who are you to think you can go to chiropractic school at 28 years old with two kids in a different state? Like, all of these things and I just chose to it. I mean, even today, I think it never gets easy because they're just sneaky. They come in and they say the nastiest things to you, and they start questioning, what kind of father are you? And it's all sort of like current. So I think I'm certain that truth card has helped me a lot to stay focused on really what is the truth of the situation, and to know that a good percentage of those voices in your head are lies, and knowing that, um, having that tool that Brent gave me was huge in my life. Brent was a mentor. Uh, Craig Bueller was sort of a mentor at the time. I had a neighbor, Roger Ogswalla, who's an awesome guy. I had a favorite uncle in Norway who really sort of guided some of the decisions I made when I was younger as an advisor. My grandpa was in Norway, he was one of my favorite people ever. And he taught me, he'd say these words in Norwegian over and over again: patience, love, and humility. He'd just say that over and over again in Norwegian. And just remembering those words, like it's ultimately, when it boils right down to it, that's what matters. So these guys, these people in my life, my mom's amazing. I mean, she's like probably next to my wife, she's probably the closest person, that I have. My guard is down. I don't have to be anyone with my mom. So yeah, I think seeking and finding those people in your life that can be mentors that are bringing true principles are I think a must have. It was in my life.
The idea of coming to self, I love that, and I think that's particularly important, in those moments, where you know those are true. Mile 40, like the phrase mile 40 represents the moments where your back is up against a wall, and essentially your rock bottom moments. And I imagine those chapters of your life where that probably was your mile 40 era. And this, to say the least. And the idea of coming to self and identifying who it is that you are. One of the things that I've realized over time is when you go through those exercises, especially during those moments, you tend to be conservative with regards to how you define yourself and your purpose. And I think, and let me know if you agree or disagree with me, now that you can look back on everything that happened and look at where you are today and the person that you are today, and the mission of what you do today, and put financial success aside, is it fair to say that you're a lot more than maybe you thought you were at that point?
100%. 100%. I I am constantly looking for ways to get better. And that drive was what made me believe. You mentioned some of the adversity that I've had. It's the same thing. It's the same principles. It's the same idea that you run into a challenge and you don't quit. You find a way through. So if I look back on who I was when I was 25 or 28, when I went through that rock bottom, and then who I was when I was 35, still going to school and having to deal with, I'm 35 with 2 kids, still going to school, like all of those voices in your head. And, I think I learned along the way that those don't go away. They're just part of the package, and to not focus on them. And that's kind of where the delusion comes from, is like everything around you is telling you one thing, but you're going to focus on this other, which is, another word might be persistence, positivity, like all of these things that I just sort of practiced when I went through those things. Everyone goes through challenges, and everyone, oh my God, is this it? Am I going to lose everything? Like there's all those things you have. And that's why it's so important to surround yourself, in my opinion, with people that care and love you. You need a good community, as close as your family or wife or husband, kids. And then, as it sort of ripples out into the different people you're around in your life. So yes, to answer your question, I do feel different. But I haven't given up. I haven't stopped that drive to be better.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's why I think that drive can't ever go away. And I ask you that question because I don't think my intention for asking that question is because I want the listener on the other side of this show to draw hope from this, to understand that it can be better. And chances are, if you were to do the exercise right now of trying to define who you are and what you stand for and everything in the pit of your mile 40 moment or era, chances are you're gonna undersell yourself. And if you just keep your eye on constant growth, commitment, persistence, powering through, you're going to surprise yourself with what you see on the other side. And I'm pretty sure, that's what happened here on multiple fronts. And, now we go back to the motorcycle accident and let's talk about, where things went from there.
You said something I wanted to mention though.
Yeah.
I think life should have ease, but life is not easy. And in my life, mine, and the listeners can apply this wherever they want to, but when I'm having a challenge and I close my eyes and I sort of imagine myself in a space where there's pressure coming from different spaces, different areas, whether it's personal, professional, business, relationships, friends, whatever, money, finances, I stop and think to myself, where do I feel the most resistance? Where is that coming from? And that's usually typically what you try to avoid. You're like, I don't want to do that. And I've realized to step into that, do hard things. And I try to do hard things every day, whether it's a workout or a cold plunge or, meditation sometimes is hard, and focusing on your intentions and what you want in life. So I think it's important to understand that you should have ease in your life. And that to me is nervous system regulation, understanding how to breathe and, acclimate, assimilate. But I also believe strongly that you should do hard things, because hard things there's always good things on the other side. And when life starts to create pressure and it gets so much that you almost can't bear it, something amazing is around the corner. Tony Robbins taught me that when I was in my early 20s. I'd gone through some rough times, and I listened to his 90 Days to Success or whatever it was, still on the cassette tapes I'd put in my car, and I'd do everything he said. And I really saw that when you do hard things, you become stronger for it, and recognizing when there is pressure and knowing that it's going to break at some point. And that's why I said when we were going through our challenges with the technical thing, I said, this only means it's going to be an amazing podcast.
That's right.
I just wanted to point that out. I think that as you talk about those things, I didn't want to miss that opportunity to share
No,
that.
I agree wholeheartedly on that. And then that's one of, the key tenors of what I believe in and what I hope to, you know, drive home with the audience is, you know, the comeback is greater than the setback is a tagline, that I've had for years. And, you know, once you put yourself in those difficult situations, you truly experience the beauty of navigating them and realizing, your potential and the potential of others and the potential of, what you've learned over the course of your lifetime. And in a some people might call it sick, but in a way it's addicting because you can never get enough of it. And you want the rest
You
of the
sound
world
like
to
a
feel it.
runner.
I am, but and you know what? The ironic thing is, it was my mile 40 moment that got me into running. I would have never been a runner had I not, put my back up against a wall in a situation that I had never in my wildest dreams thought I could, navigate. And then I was there and it was really dark and it was, really difficult. And then I made it out. And then I realized, I can do hard things. And then lo and behold, I signed up for a marathon and here we are today. So,
Exercising
so
resilience.
yeah. So, it definitely ties. Um, so talk to us a little bit more about, the birth of Theragun.
I mentioned earlier that I got in a motorcycle accident, had to practice. And so I was looking for something that I could use on myself to treat my pain. Those big gaps between when you get treatment or when you get pain relief provided by someone else just didn't make sense to me as a chiropractor. I'm thinking like, I have to wait for someone to do this. So just trying to find a way to be able to put something on myself that I could use myself was what led to Theragun. Never in a million years did I think I would do what I'm doing, and not ever would I think it'd be a global company and, the product, what it is. So I made the first Theragun for myself in 2008, early 2008. I used that to get myself better. And by late 2008, I was back to practice. I'd missed several months. As you can imagine, wasn't making a lot of money. I had a practice that I had to run, and these were my tools, my hands. If you can't use your hands, you're not really effective. And I had my right hand, I had total numbness and tingling in a bunch of fingers. So I was just looking for a solution. I didn't care what it was. I didn't care what you called it. I didn't care how loud or noisy it was. So I made the first Theragun in 2008, used it on a patient, and watched this guy get better. And through his journey, I really found this caring, empathetic side of myself, even more than I thought. And seeing him recover and sort of become healthy again by using this the same way I did. At the end of his care, he basically challenged me and said, you got to figure this thing out because it saved our life and you can't unknow that. So over the next 8 years, I made 5 different prototypes, learning what it was, understanding, the 10,000 hour rule. I think I treated at least 10,000 hours with people, and you start to kind of understand, what it is. So when I finally made something that I felt like I could really create and put in someone's hands and they wouldn't hurt themselves, we launched the G1. I'd made a promise to a manufacturer in China that I'd sell 1,000 of them. And my business partner came on and brought the money on. And we launched G1 in June of 2016. And in 2017, August of 2017, we launched the G2 Pro. And ironically, in September of 2017, I met my wife. And she was kind of the missing link. In a brand like ours, there were 3 things that I realized we needed over the years, which was an athlete, an influencer, someone to talk about it, who had a lot larger, impactful voice than I did. I needed someone that supported that person, a physio, a massage therapist, a trainer, whoever that was. And the third thing that my wife brought was a voice, press, PR, coverage. And those 3 things, suddenly the company took off like a rocket ship. So we sold more G2 Pros than I ever thought we would because they were so loud. But that was our quest as well, to make something that was quiet, that was omnipresent, that could be anywhere, whether it was in your backpack, in your spa, next to your bed. So, with the help of my wife and the growth of the company, we became part of pop culture. And, then that led into teams and athletes and a lot of the other things that happened over the years. So we acquired a company when we were younger. We transitioned from Theragun to Therabody in 2018, 2019. And once, they say you build it, they will come. Once we created Therabody, suddenly we had Power Dot and Recovery Pump, which was our jet boots that ended up being jet boots. So suddenly we had this sort of this ecosystem, and there wasn't anyone really doing that. We weren't trying to be the first. We were just trying to solve problems. And we realized there's a lot of natural solutions that we could innovate on and put into people's hands, and they could treat themselves. What I love about our products is most of them are autonomous. They don't need someone to treat. You don't need someone to treat you with it. But if you do, it almost makes it better if that's possible. And these are things we learned over the years. It was the messaging that we shared. When you open a magazine and you see a gift guide in 2020 or 2021 about what Theragun does for you, and that really gave everyone the impression that we were everywhere. I can't tell you how many people I ran into say, you guys are everywhere. And what does that mean?
Yeah, you're all over my closet, and but the truth is that you were, like, at that point you were in every gym, like every boutique fitness studio had a product of yours. This was especially right before COVID. There was this rise, and eyes popped. The other thing about it is I'd love to hear. I mean, my mind's all over the place because it's so awesome to hear, but it's also fascinating. So talk to me a little about the science behind it. And even even if you understand the science behind it, putting yourself in a garage and getting the tools to construct it, and even if you believe it, you must be thinking at some point, like, how has no one already come up with this?
100%.
Yeah. So talk
100%. That was
talk
one
to
of
me
the
a little bit
first
about
things I
that.
thought. Like,
Yeah.
this is doing this to me.
Yeah.
How has no one thought of this?
Yeah.
So yeah.
If you know me, you know that I like to look good and feel good. As an endurance athlete who trains daily, I need my wardrobe to fit the mold. Roan creates performance driven clothing for your active lifestyle. Each piece is designed for versatility and made with integrity to outfit you for an active life lived on your own terms. The Roan promise is to help you move forever forward. Use code MILE40 for 20% off online and in store for new customers only. Visit www.rhone.com, that's Rhone spelled RHONE, or find your local store and move forever forward starting today. So let's start with the science. Talk to us a little bit about the science behind it.
So what I realized Theragun did, and this is from my own experience, is the first thing is it decreases the pain you're experiencing through something called the pain gate theory. When you have pain travels to the brain on a pathway that's around 55 miles an hour. And I'm going to sort of break it down, have it make sense to people. When you put something on your skin, hot, cold, prickly, Theragun, whatever it is, their organ, our skin, is an organ, and it's the fastest acting to the brain. So now, if you put something on your skin and it runs to the brain, it's getting there almost 300 miles an hour. So you got 55 miles an hour and almost 300 miles an hour. Well, you know what's the brain's paying attention to is paying attention to the thing that's coming in quicker. And that's a really drawn out explanation of the pain gate theory. So the first thing it does is it decreases pain through these pathways. The next thing it does is it increases blood flow. So you think about what that does for an injury, for activity, for just before you go to bed, just before you wake up, like all of these different things that you want to increase blood flow. Aged people, like having issues getting blood flow to certain areas of their body, diabetes, going back to my brother. And then the third thing is it increases the flexibility. So it takes away the tension in the body. So for me, that's what I experienced in the early days. And when I went to Man United, one of the first teams I went to back in the early days, I went and saw them and I showed them how to use this. And I worked on an athlete. I actually did it at the Lakers as well. And the guys there who were in charge, they said, we need white papers. I'm not an academic. I'm a chiropractor. I'm a practical person. I'm not doing the research. So I wasn't sure what they meant by that. And I would just point and say, well, I just showed you what it did. You experienced what it did. And they're like, yeah, but with something new like this, we have to have white papers. We need science that validates that. So I had to go back and do a study. We did a very first study at USC with a friend of mine named Todd Schroeder. We became super close over the years. And another kid named Malcolm Jones who helped a lot. I mean, there's some instrumental people in my life back then who helped with the science. So now fast forward, we have science. We have, I think, 30 papers that have been published. I could be wrong, but it's a lot. We have more research about what Therabody does than all of the other wellness massage gun companies combined. So that drove us into all of our other products. PowerDot, there's science behind PowerDot and how you use it, when you use it, and specific protocols. There's science behind Recovery Air, same thing. There's science behind our new mask. So everything we've launched, we brought on a guy named Tim Roberts, who still runs our science and innovation. We brought him on in 2018 or 19. He's been there ever since. And he runs that part of it. It's a big piece of what we do. I mean, that I want my goal is that our products work without me. Like, and in order for that to work, you need to understand what they do, both the protocol and the science, so you understand the expected outcome. If your hamstrings are tight, how do you treat tight hamstrings? And anyone knows what happens when you have tight hamstrings, especially runners. It starts to affect your IT band and your hip flexors and all these other things. So if I now said it decreases pain, increases blood flow, and increases your range of motion, that's exactly what you want. We did a study on horses in London. And we were able to get a longer stride length by 23% in a horse just by using Theragun in certain areas, applying our science that we used on the human side. So science is a foundational pillar of who we are as a company, because in the early days, I realized, wow, people aren't going to buy this if they just take my word for it. I'm this crazy chiro from Los Angeles. Like, who's going to, reference that? But if I came in and said, hey, look, Cristiano Ronaldo's using this, but this is why he's using it, and here's the research and the validation protocols to back that up, who could say no to that?
Yeah. You personally, even from your days as a chiro, what geeked you out more so? Was it the science or the business? Like, were you more interested in running a successful practice as a chiropractor, or were you more interested in the science of being a chiropractor?
I'll be honest, I think most medical professionals are not businessmen. You have to have a business to do this. So I want to help people. And I've realized through what drove Theragun was, what's it going to take to get this into people's hands? Is it a business? If that's it, then I'm fine with that. But whatever that is. So I didn't sit down and think like, I'm going to make a business. I created my first business in 2008 when I made the first Theragun, because I needed something. But as it grew, what geeked me out was when every time I used it, people thanked me. And it was more than a thank. It was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. It's changed my life. That's what drove this. I met then my business partner, who was a businessman and understood the structure of, accounting and manufacturing and those types of things. That wasn't, thank God, because that's not something that I inherently knew. I would have had to learn those things, and I did over the years. And it's, I feel like I have a master's degree in finance and manufacturing and, sourcing and all those things, because I've been doing this now for 12 years. So it's a great question. I think what drove me what drove me to this day, still does, is healing people, helping people feel better, mind, body, spirit, soul. And I feel like people that are conscious of those things resonate with our message.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an important question to ask, because if I bring things back, like, you talk about growing up, your dad didn't have a lot of money, but you talk about the resourcefulness of your dad. And I could imagine, you know, I can imagine your dad being you building the original Theragun, just based on what you shared a little bit there, and draw the parallels there. But like I've seen from many people who've been on the show, who have seen success on the back of, perhaps not necessarily being born into it, there tends to be a crossroads where now you do need to educate yourself on what it's like to navigate a full scale business, making the decisions you have to make as the founder and someone who's behind the architecture of the entire thing. And in certain cases, it could take you away from, where your real passion is. And one of the things that is clear, in speaking to you is the authenticity here. But I imagine, it wasn't all smooth sailing. Even when there was success, there had to have been a lot of difficult decisions.
Yeah, it's like a duck, like you don't see what's happening under the water. They just see them cruising along the top, and water runs off them. And one of the things I learned in the early days, and it was a really big lesson when my wife joined, is getting people that were really good at what they do and just letting them do whatever they do, just creating the opportunity for them to just excel. That's really what made bringing Tim on was the same thing. I'm not a science guy, I mentioned that, but he is. We had a guy named Jaime who was, without Jaime, I can honestly say we wouldn't have Theraguns, because he was the one that was able to take my crazy thoughts and this idea that I wanted to evolve and innovate and make it better. He did that. He went to China. Lived there 6 months out of the year, most years. So I believe that if you want a business, you're crazy to think you're going to be able to do it all. You're just not. and good CEOs hire really good people for positions and let them do what they're good at and help manage them, encourage them, and understanding that it's going to be hard sometimes. But I consider myself a very good business person now. I mentioned earlier that I had a flooring business. It was super hectic, managing a bunch of different things, and anything could go wrong at any given time. And this thing's not ready, and I'm working around a contractor. Those sort of, that energy, that hecticness was something that I was familiar with. But also getting someone that's really good at what they do and having it not be I wasn't bothered by that. So if anyone's listening that's starting a business, you do have to be a man of all. You got to wear all the hats for a while. That's just the way it is. I mean, I was running our Instagram, I was shipping our products, I was putting labels on the boxes, like I was doing all those things. But to scale, you have to get people that know what they're doing.
Absolutely. Fun question for you. I don't know how old your kids are, but do they think you're cool now?
Yeah, they do. I have a special relationship with my kids. My son's 27, my daughter's 26. It's crazy to say that, but I have a really good relationship with them. I mean, you as a father, you sometimes justify your decisions and choices for the long-term vision of your children getting life better, but it also comes with heartache and missing daddy-daughter days and scout camps with your son and all those types of things. But I've taken on the relationship that I have with my kids. I was telling a friend of mine this the other day. There were times when my kids were growing up, my son was a really good basketball player, and I would go home to watch him play basketball. And I would watch the game, and then he'd, go in and be with his buddies after, and they'd go hang out or whatever. And then he'd come home late, go to bed, and then the next morning he had to go to school, or you just never really got a chance to relive the game. And I realized when I was in California, he'd call me after the game and we'd talk for 30 minutes and he'd tell me everything he wanted to tell me about this thing. And it was 2 seconds left. And I could feel it, and I was listening to him. And so, me finding a way to have a relationship with my kids once FaceTime came around and you could actually FaceTime and watch games from the sideline and then talk about it after. So my kids are great kids. I mean, I pray every day that they're healthy and happy, and that's all I want. And I can say that they are.
So talk to me a little bit about, clearly you've built a platform and a product and a business that's revolutionary, and everybody associates the name Therabody with recovery. And even myself as an athlete and someone who didn't know you that well prior to this call, I could have gone to any one of the million other booths and just picked up the cheapest product I found. But in my mind, Therabody is, the top echelon, and that's where I want to be. But as the business owner and someone who has to deal with this all the time, talk to me a little bit about what it taught you once you started to see the rise of all these competitors, and what your thoughts are on the industry as a whole.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. I think a good comparison is you think of anything like any high performance product, whether it's a motorcycle, a car, a telephone. It's easy to imitate what it looks like. And I've accepted that. And I was interested and curious how what their interpretation it was of a massage gun. And so when I walk through these trade shows and I see them, I sort of chuckle because of course you can make it look like that, but do you know why? Do you know the science? More importantly, do you understand the application? So, we worked with Formula One pretty extensively, and then NASCAR in the early days. I traveled around with Richard Petty Motorsports, and I was their Cairo on the weekends. And there's this idea that all the cars look exactly the same, but they're not. You take the top off, they're totally different because of the things people are doing. So I just realized they may have the right car, they may have the right shape, they may have the right box, they may have the right message, they may call it the right thing, but they don't have the foundational structure that's going to make it last in someone's life. And so for me, I've always tried to maintain my nobility when it comes to that. And hey, I had a guy one time say, I could make one of these. Like, you know what? You're probably right. And good luck. Let me know how it goes. Because it took me 9 years. It might take you 5. But if you're into that, go for it. Like, that's kind of how I look at it. And if someone wants to copy us and imitate us, now I've got over 600 patents, my name on over 600 patents. So you have to protect yourself. You ought to be smart about that, obviously. But when I walk around and I see these people, I mean, we've shut down so many different people on Amazon, different suppliers, because we didn't know that was you send them a cease and desist letter and they'll say, oh, we didn't know that was patented. We didn't know there was IP around that. And, so they shut it down. But I'm confident, so confident that no one's putting in to the products, both innovation. I'm working on G7. There's no other massage gun in the world that has their second version, let alone their 6th or 7th. So that's what drives us. That's why I sort of chuckle when I see them, because they're always going to run a little bit late. There are people that are trying to create things around new innovations around a massage gun that I've seen that there's no reason why. What's the purpose of that? So yeah, it is cool, I think, to be honest with you, and authentic, Bishoy, that it's pretty cool to be able to say we started an industry, that we created the space. But also there's always a headwind.
Yeah, no, I love that. And, it kind of got me thinking, you always have to innovate, right? And you have your flagship product that really started all this. And, I think it is synonymous with Therabody. But now if you think about the entire catalog, post acquisitions and everything else, is there a particular product that surprised you?
Yeah, cupping.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Would
our
not have thought
cupping
that would have been the
product.
answer. Really?
Yeah, that one I didn't think people would get it. When we created it and we created the protocols, we applied the same practices and beliefs and stuff to the cupping. I remember watching the first time we did like sort of a launch, and we had a bunch of influencers at Reset in Brentwood in California. And how excited they were, and they knew how to use it and put it on their body. And so yeah, cupping, that was probably the thing that shocked me the most.
Wow, straight from the source. That's awesome. All right. So to wrap things up here, Dr. J, when you think about your journey, not just as inventor or a founder, but really someone who turned pain into purpose. And what I love about your story in particular is the the pains that you spoke about are all pains that we can relate to, in different ways. They're very real, right? Like bankruptcy, divorce, injury. These are all things as humans, even if we can't relate to all three of them, we could probably pick one and find a way to put ourselves in your shoes. And now that you've seen the other side, and I know the other side is not over yet, it's continuing to grow. What do you hope is, one of the most important lessons people carry from your story?
Man, that's a great question. To find their truth about them. If you find your truth, it's going to be challenged. You're going to have all of these voices we talked about. But I think if you find your truth, you can navigate pretty much anything. I think resilience as a human is one of our truths. Positivity was one of mine. Resourcefulness is one of my truths. Strength is one of my truths. Being a leader is one of my truths. I think if people recognize the challenges and the I don't know, whatever maybe setbacks or the hard times, what got me through those hard times was what I shared with you. An amazing wife, an amazing community, good mentors, but more importantly was me believing my truths about myself. So that's if I could wave a magic wand and everyone would have that power, that's what it would be.
I love that. The truth will set you free. Dr. J, really quick, what were the 3 words your grandpa used to tell you?
You want me to say them in Norwegian?
Say them in Norwegian and then translate.
Kjærlighet, tålmodighet, and ydmykhet. Love, kjærlighet, humility, and love, humility, and patience.
I love that. Dr. J, thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing with us today. You're right. This episode ended up being a lot better than I ever thought. And kudos to the technical difficulties beforehand. But I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on, for sharing with us, and for giving us the time today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.